بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakumullah khair for joining us for day 12 of Little Ramadan Reminders. Today we're talking about part 2 of Al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf wal-Nahy 'anil Munkar, which is ordering the good and forbidding the evil. And essentially, when in its practical form, what it becomes is carrying da'wah. And so the focus of today is the pitfalls when carrying da'wah, the dangers that a person can fall into when discussing with other people. Because if you're discussing for the wrong reasons, your intentions are not right, or your nafs is in a bad state, and you tend to argue and so on, you'll lose all of your efforts. They all become worthless. You're just sitting there, exhausting yourself, and then you face Allah Azza wa Jalla and your efforts are worthless if you fall into these pitfalls. And these pitfalls are, first of all, when a person has a love for attention, and that causes a person to love arguing. They love the discussion itself. They love to be in a position where they have somebody in front of them and they're talking to the person and they're finding points to defeat the person. They want to win the conversation. This is a very significant poison that may enter into our hearts, and may Allah protect us. The second one is pride, and the refusal to accept that you've made a mistake. It's the refusal to accept that an error has been made. And this is something that happens when a person is essentially discussing a strong point, and then he realizes that the other person made a clarified something for him. And due to the fact that he's in front of a person, or especially in front of a crowd, he doesn't want to admit that he made a mistake, so he'll just kind of dodge it somehow, or even argue against it, or even worse off, argue an incorrect point intentionally due to not wanting to be wrong. And of course that's the worst form of it. So that's a second problem that occurs that might take a root in our heart, and again, may Allah Azza wa Jalla protect us. And the third one is where a person wants to be characterized as a person of knowledge. They want to skip the process of the decades of study and the decades of contemplation and just jump ahead and stand in front of people and just be some great sheikh. They read about the great ulama of history and they want to be just like them, not realizing that what made those scholars great was sincerity, was dedication, was humility in front of Allah Azza wa Jal, and willingness to say that I'm wrong, I've made a mistake, I don't know, and so on. But no, many brothers today, again, it's because we're all returning to our deen, and we're all excited for the deen. We're all excited about doing something for the deen. And so that there's a lot of pitfalls that are in front of us, tests and traps, and of course traps of shaitan. And so what we must do is recognize that these traps exist, and that we must prepare for them as best we can, so that we meet Allah Azza wa Jal with Him accepting our efforts. Because what good is all this effort if you meet Allah Azza wa Jal and it's all thrown away and you have absolutely nothing to offer in terms of all the da'wah that you've carried. As for what we can do so that we could work towards minimizing the effect of these traps and corruption that might enter into our heart, the first thing to do is, before entering into conversation, in order to address the problem of the love for arguing and the love for attention, what a person must do, one step is, number one, turn your attention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and intend to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help in this conversation, and to lead you and whoever you're discussing with to whatever pleases Him, not to whatever pleases you. And identify the objective of the conversation, at least to yourself. Know what's the point that I want to address, why do I want to address this? Is there a good purpose in addressing this? Is there a good goal in us reaching a conclusion? If there isn't, if for example you're just going to discuss a point where you're just going to point fingers at each other and attack a sheikh, or attack an aqidah, or attack a madhab, or whatever, and in the end you haven't really fixed anything in particular, well then in this particular case this is a waste of time. But if there's something like, if there's a hukm shari that must be implemented, if there's a problem that exists that must be corrected, and that people are following this misunderstanding and this must be corrected, then a person turns their attention to Allah Azza wa Jal and does their very best to try to reach a good conclusion with the conversation. And it is important to understand what Islam says about a person who loves to argue, a person who loves to debate and to just defeat his opponents. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari, "Inna abghad al-rijal 'inda Allah al-alad al-khasm," that the person who is that makes Allah the most angry is the one who is most severe in their argumentativeness. As for the second point, which is the issue of pride and the unwillingness to admit error, it's important to recognize that just by understanding this very simple point, that every time you're wrong, you've just realized something correct. And so by following this path, you seek a path towards Allah Azza wa Jal, because we're seeking the truth. We're seeking what Allah Azza wa Jal gave us of guidance and wisdom. We're not here seeking something to win, or arguments to win, or battles to be victorious in. And it's important for us to recognize the warning of Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Quran for people who refuse to accept the truth, refuse to accept that they were wrong when the truth comes to them. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُ اتَّقِ اللَّهِ أَخَذَتْهُ الْعِزَّةُ بِالْإِثْمِ. If it is said to them, fear Allah, his pride overwhelmed him into sin. فَحَسْبُهُ جَهَنَّمْ. And so he will be thrown into the hellfire. And so we need to be very careful of allowing our pride to cause us to refuse to seek the truth when the truth, or to accept the truth when the truth finds its way to us. Because the truth is from Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's rejecting the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the third point, which is speaking without knowledge, the most important thing to understand in this is that when we are discussing the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal and explaining the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, what we are doing is we are speaking on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever you are giving knowledge, whenever you are transmitting knowledge of some sort, what you are actually doing, whether you realize it or not, you're not transmitting the opinion of a scholar, you're not transmitting your own personal view, you're transmitting what you believe is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for any one of us to speak without knowledge means we're speaking about what Allah Azza wa Jal says is halal or haram, right or wrong, deviance or guidance, based on our own desires, not on a clear understanding of the texts and the explanations of the text and the Arabic the Arabic meanings of the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used. Rather, what we're doing is we're allowing our pride, we're allowing our desire to be men of knowledge to get ahead of our understanding that we are only here to teach what Allah Azza wa Jalla has taught us. Essentially, when people say that they are a student of knowledge, they're not saying this out of just, oh, I'm such a humble man. Even though Imam Shafi'i said, oh, I'm so humble, I'm a student of knowledge. No, they mean it because they're talking about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are all constant students of the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jalla. We are students of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's message, the Quran and Sunnah. That's what we're students of. So what we're doing, even though we're learning through scholars, the whole thing goes back to Allah Azza wa Jalla's wisdom. And to speak on behalf of Allah Azza wa Jalla without knowing to the very best of your ability the hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a very dangerous place to be on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us in the Quran where He says to us, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Do not delve into that which you don't have knowledge of. Truly, your hearing and your sight and either your heart or your speech, all of that will be held to account. You will be held responsible. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the patience and the strength to avoid these three major pitfalls of the love for arguing and pride and refusal to acknowledge error when one makes an error, and this desire to be men of knowledge or people of knowledge when we're not there yet, when we don't actually have knowledge on a particular topic. And especially just because we have knowledge in one topic, it doesn't mean that we have knowledge in others, where people go and they become scholars in one particular thing, such as tafsir al-Quran, and then they delve into topics that they have not studied and they make massive errors, and then they refuse to take advice that when people explain to them, when the experts of this other topic come and correct them, and they don't accept that advice. And so we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to protect us by allowing us to enter into every conversation and every element of the da'wah with the intention only to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and knowing the goal of that particular conversation, as well as having not only a willingness but looking forward to being wrong, because that means we're looking forward to learning something correct. And also remembering that knowledge takes decades of not just memorizing and studying books, knowing that it takes decades of contemplation and listening to other viewpoints and analyzing all the different opinions, and also seeing how things apply in everyday life and seeing the patterns of the Sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jalla in His creation. We are all students of knowledge, because no matter how much we study, we've only studied a small portion of one area or another area, or maybe a few areas, but there's always areas that we need work on. And that's why we should always approach every conversation as students of knowledge. We're there to hear, what does this person have to say? What can I learn from other people, as well as what can I offer for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair for joining us, and I hope that Allah Azza wa Jalla keeps our feet firm on seeking the truth and working to please Him in carrying the da'wah. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.